If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Tell me in the comments, have you ever discovered a secret that changed everything? The crystal chandelier in the Montero mansion caught the last rays of sunset, scattering golden light across walls that had witnessed 3 generations of secrets. Valentina Cruz stood at the service entrance, her worn leather bag clutched against her chest, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake accepting this position. "You must be the new cleaning staff." The voice came from behind her, sharp and cold as winter rain. Valentina turned to face a woman in her 60s, impeccably dressed in designer black, her silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the disapproval across her face. Doña Carmen Montero Vega, the matriarch, the one who controlled everything and everyone within these walls. "Yes, Señora, Valentina Cruz. The agency sent me this morning. I know who sent you. What I don't know is whether you'll last longer than the others." Doña Carmen's eyes traveled down Valentina's simple uniform with obvious disdain, cataloguing every thread, every scuffed shoe, every sign of a life lived without the cushion of wealth. The last 3 girls couldn't handle the requirements of this household. They found the atmosphere too oppressive, the expectations too demanding. One left in the middle of the night without even collecting her final wages. Valentina straightened her spine, refusing to be intimidated. 5 years ago, she would have been interviewing for positions in corner offices, not standing at service entrances being scrutinized like livestock. But 5 years ago, she had been a different person. Before the betrayal, before the fall. "I'm not easily discouraged, Señora." "We'll see about that." Doña Carmen turned and began walking, clearly expecting Valentina to follow. "My son, Sebastian, is the master of this house. You will not speak to him unless spoken to. You will not enter his private quarters on the 3rd floor without explicit permission. And you will never, under any circumstances, discuss what you see or hear within these walls. Is that understood?" "Perfectly, Señora." They passed through a labyrinth of corridors lined with paintings that probably cost more than Valentina would earn in a lifetime. Each room they passed seemed more opulent than the last, yet something felt wrong. Despite all the luxury, despite the fresh flowers and the gleaming surfaces, the mansion felt hollow, cold, like a museum, rather than a home. "Your duties will primarily be the main floor and the east wing," Doña Carmen continued. "The head housekeeper, Lucia, will provide your schedule. Meals are taken in the staff quarters. You are not to be seen by guests. Questions? Just one, Señora. You mentioned your son is the master of the house. What about your husband?" Doña Carmen stopped so abruptly that Valentina nearly collided with her. When the older woman turned, something flickered in her eyes. Fear, anger. It vanished before Valentina could identify it. "My husband passed away 6 months ago. A tragic accident. We do not speak of it." Her voice could have frozen fire. "Any other questions?" "No, Señora." "Good. Lucia will show you to your quarters." As Doña Carmen disappeared down another corridor, Valentina exhaled slowly. She had worked in difficult environments before. She had survived worse than a cold employer and a mansion full of secrets. Whatever darkness lurked in the Montero household, she would do her job, collect her paycheck, and rebuild her shattered life one day at a time. She had no intention of getting involved in anyone else's problems. The resolution lasted exactly 4 hours. It was nearly midnight when Valentina heard it. She had finished her first shift and was making her way back to the staff quarters, her muscles aching from hours of polishing silver and scrubbing marble, when a sound stopped her cold in the darkened hallway. Someone was crying. Not the theatrical sobbing of telenovelas, but something far more devastating. Quiet, broken sounds that seemed to come from deep within someone's soul, the kind of grief that had no audience, no performance, no hope of comfort. The sound led her up a staircase she wasn't supposed to climb, toward the 3rd floor she had been forbidden to enter. Common sense screamed at her to turn back. She had been explicitly warned. Breaking the rules on her first day would mean immediate dismissal, and she couldn't afford to lose this job. But the crying continued, and something in those sounds called to her professional instincts, the instincts she had spent years developing, years training. The instincts of a psychologist who had once dedicated her life to healing broken minds. She found him in a small alcove at the end of the hallway, hidden from view by a marble column. Sebastian Montero Vega, heir to the family empire, sat on the cold floor with his back against the wall, his expensive suit jacket discarded beside him, tears streaming silently down his face. The moonlight streaming through the window cast silver shadows across his features, highlighting the tracks of moisture on his cheeks. The sight struck something deep within her chest, a recognition that transcended the obvious disparity between their social positions. He was beautiful, even in his devastation, dark hair that fell across his forehead, strong features now contorted with grief, broad shoulders that shook with each suppressed sob. But it was his eyes that struck her when he finally looked up and noticed her presence. Empty, utterly empty, like someone had reached inside him and scooped out everything that made him human. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I know. My mother will fire you if she finds out. Probably." He stared at her, confusion cutting through his grief. "Then why are you still standing there?" Valentina should have apologized, should have turned and fled, and pretended she had never seen the heir to the Montero fortune crying alone in the dark like a lost child. Instead, she did something that would change both their lives forever. She sat down on the floor across from him, her simple uniform a stark contrast to the marble and gold that surrounded them. "Because you look like someone who needs to not be alone right now. You don't know anything about me." "No, but I know pain when I see it, and I know what it looks like when someone has been carrying it alone for too long." For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then something in his expression shifted, some wall crumbling just slightly. "What's your name?" "Valentina. I'm the new cleaning staff." "Sebastian." A ghost of a bitter smile crossed his face. "Though I suppose you already know that. Everyone knows who I am. The golden heir, the successful CEO, the man who has everything." He laughed, and there was no humor in it whatsoever. "If they could see me now." "What happened to you?" The question hung in the air between them. Too personal, too direct, the kind of question a servant should never ask her employer. But in that moment, in that dark hallway, the rules of society seemed very far away. "Everything," he whispered, "and nothing, both at the same time." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. They sat in silence for what felt like hours, two strangers sharing a moment of unexpected connection in a house full of secrets. When he finally stood to leave, pausing at the edge of the alcove, he looked back at her one last time. "Valentina, tomorrow, when you're cleaning the study, you'll find a painting of my father above the fireplace. Behind it, there's a safe. Inside that safe, there are things that would destroy this family if they ever came to light." Her heart stopped. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the first person who's looked at me like I'm human in 6 months." His voice cracked. "And because I'm starting to think that maybe some things need to be destroyed." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her alone with questions that would haunt her sleep. What secrets was the Montero family hiding? What had broken Sebastian so completely? And why did she feel, deep in her bones, that her fate had somehow become entangled with his from the moment she stepped into this mansion? 3 weeks into her employment at the Montero mansion, Valentina had developed a routine: wake at 5, clean the main floor before the family stirred, avoid Doña Carmen's hawk-like surveillance, take her meals in the staff quarters, and every night, without fail, listen for the sound of crying from the 3rd floor. It came every night, sometimes soft, sometimes anguished, always alone. She hadn't spoken to Sebastian since that first night. He spent his days locked in meetings, his evenings attending social functions with his mother, his nights drowning in whatever demons haunted him. From a distance, he appeared every inch the successful CEO the magazines described. Sharp suits, tailored to perfection, confident stride that commanded attention. The kind of man who entered rooms and immediately became their center of gravity, drawing all eyes with an effortless magnetism. Business journals called him a prodigy. Society pages speculated about his romantic prospects. Financial analysts praised his strategic mind. No one saw what Valentina saw from the shadows, where servants were meant to remain invisible. But Valentina saw what others missed. The way his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking. The hollow expression that settled over his face the moment he was alone. The dark circles under his eyes that even expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. You're staring again. Valentina nearly dropped the silver vase she was polishing. Lucia, the head housekeeper, had appeared beside her with the silent efficiency of 20 years' service. I wasn't staring, I was observing. Is that what they call it now? Lucia's weathered face creased into something between a smile and a warning. Be careful, girl. The young master is not for the likes of us, and even if he were, she lowered her voice. There are things in this house that are better left alone. What kind of things? Lucia's expression shuttered immediately. Finish the dining room before lunch. Doña Carmen is expecting guests. She walked away before Valentina could press further, leaving behind another unanswered question to add to the growing list. The guests that afternoon were not what Valentina expected. Through the kitchen, she could hear raised voices from the dining room. One voice she recognized as Doña Carmen's, cold and controlled. The other was male, aggressive, demanding. And I'm telling you, Carmen, the board is getting impatient. 6 months of delays is unacceptable. The transition of power takes time, Rodrigo. My son is still grieving. Your son is a mess. Everyone can see it. At this rate, he'll run the company into the ground before the year is out. There was a long pause. When Doña Carmen spoke again, her voice had dropped to something almost dangerous. My son will do exactly as I've prepared him to do. He always has. He always will. And if he doesn't, if his instability becomes public, then I will handle it, as I handle everything. Valentina pressed herself against the wall as footsteps approached. A man emerged from the dining room, tall and distinguished, silver at his temples. He paused when he noticed her, his eyes traveling over her uniform with barely concealed disdain. New staff? Yes, sir. Carmen always did prefer fresh faces. They ask fewer questions. He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Smart girl. Keep it that way. He walked past her, and something about him made her skin crawl. She had met men like him before, men who wore civility like a mask over something far darker underneath. That night she couldn't sleep. The conversation replayed in her mind, mixing with everything else she had observed. Something was very wrong in the Montero household, something beyond grief, beyond normal family dysfunction. The walls of this mansion seemed to whisper secrets, and every shadow held the weight of unspoken truths. She tossed and turned on her narrow bed, the cheap mattress creaking with every movement. Outside her window, the city of Mexico glittered like scattered diamonds, indifferent to the dramas playing out in the mansions of the wealthy. At 2 a.m, she found herself standing outside the study door. The painting of Patricio Montero Vega stared down at her from above the fireplace, his stern features immortalized in oil and canvas. According to Lucia, he had been dead for 6 months. A tragic accident. A car that went off the road during a rainstorm. No witnesses. Behind that painting was a safe. And in that safe were secrets that could destroy everything. Valentina's hands shook as she approached the fireplace. What was she doing? This wasn't her problem. She was here to clean houses, not to solve mysteries. She had already lost everything once because she got too involved in other people's darkness. But Sebastian's empty eyes haunted her. The sound of his crying haunted her, and somewhere deep inside, the psychologist she used to be refused to stay silent. The painting was heavier than expected. She struggled to lift it from its hooks, her muscles straining with the effort, the gilded frame cutting into her fingers. Behind it, just as Sebastian had said, was a small safe embedded in the wall. A digital keypad glowed red in the darkness, its electronic light casting an ominous glow across her features. The safe was old but well maintained, its surface free of dust, evidence that someone accessed it regularly. She had no idea what the combination might be. Her mind raced through possibilities, birthdays, anniversaries, significant dates, but she knew nothing about the Montero family beyond what she had observed in 3 weeks of silent service. You won't find it that way. Valentina spun around so fast she nearly knocked the painting to the floor. Sebastian stood in the doorway, his white shirt untucked, his feet bare, looking nothing like the polished CEO he presented to the world. I was just... You were looking for my father's secrets." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "The same secrets I told you about 3 weeks ago, and then spent every day since wondering why I had mentioned them to a complete stranger. I shouldn't be here. I'm sorry." "No." He moved closer, and she could smell whiskey on his breath, could see the redness in his eyes. "You shouldn't be here, but you are. And now I have to decide whether you're the answer to my prayers or my destruction. I don't understand." Sebastian laughed bitterly. "Neither do I. That's the problem." He reached past her, his arm brushing against her shoulder, and typed a sequence into the keypad. The safe clicked open. "Look inside. Tell me what you see." Valentina hesitated. Whatever was in that safe would change everything. She could feel it in her bones, the same instinct that had once made her an exceptional psychologist. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again, but she was already too far in to turn back. Inside the safe was a single folder, thick, worn, as if it had been opened and closed hundreds of times. She pulled it out and began to read, her fingers trembling as she turned each page. Medical records, financial documents, legal papers, and photographs. Dozens of photographs of a woman she had never seen, with a little boy who had Sebastian's eyes. The photographs were yellowed with age, their corners worn from years of handling, evidence that someone had looked at them again and again, perhaps seeking something that could never be found. "I don't. Who is this?" "My father's first family." Sebastian's voice was flat, emotionless. "The wife and son he abandoned 30 years ago when he met my mother and decided he wanted a more advantageous match. The family he paid to disappear. The family he spent his entire life pretending didn't exist." Valentina's hands trembled as she looked at the photographs. A young woman, beautiful, holding a baby with dark hair. In one photo, the woman was smiling. In later ones, she looked tired, broken, familiar, too familiar. The room began to spin, her vision blurred at the edges. No, it couldn't be. The universe couldn't be this cruel. "Valentina, what's wrong?" She couldn't speak, could barely breathe, because she was looking at photographs of her own mother, and the child in her arms was her older brother, Luis, the brother she had never met, the brother her mother had told her died in childbirth, along with her first husband, in a supposed accident. The brother who, according to these documents, was alive and had a half-sibling named Sebastian Montero Vega. "Valentina." Sebastian grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Talk to me. What did you see?" She opened her mouth to tell him, to reveal the devastating truth that had just shattered her entire understanding of her own life. But the words wouldn't come, because her mother's face stared up at her from the photographs, and suddenly everything she thought she knew about her own past had become a lie. Valentina called in sick the next morning. She spent the entire day in her tiny room in the staff quarters, staring at the wall, while her mind raced through the implications of what she had discovered. The morning light filtered through her thin curtains, casting pale rectangles on the floor that slowly moved across the room as the hours passed. She didn't eat. She barely moved. She simply sat and thought, her world reshaping itself around the revelation that had shattered everything she believed about her own history. Her mother, Esperanza Cruz, had always been a woman of few words about her past. She spoke vaguely of a first marriage that ended in tragedy, of a baby that didn't survive, of moving to Guadalajara to start fresh. Valentina had never questioned these stories. Why would she? Her mother was the most honest person she knew, but the documents in that safe told a different story. According to Patricia Montero Vega's meticulous records, Esperanza hadn't lost her first husband and baby to tragedy. She had been paid to disappear. 500,000 pesos, transferred annually for 30 years in exchange for her silence and her absence. Her brother Luis wasn't dead. He was out there somewhere, living a life she knew nothing about, a life that had been deliberately hidden from her, erased from family history as completely as if he had never existed at all. The magnitude of this deception took her breath away. Her mother had lied to her every single day for over 2 decades. Every birthday, every holiday, every moment they had shared had been built on a foundation of secrets and silence. And Sebastian Montero Vega, the broken heir she had found crying in the dark, was her half-brother's half-brother. Not related to her by blood, but connected through a web of lies and secrets that stretched back decades. A knock on her door made her jump. "Valentina!" Sebastian's voice muffled through the wood. "I know you're in there. We need to talk about what happened last night." She considered not answering. She could stay silent, wait for him to leave, and then pack her bags and disappear. Forget about the Montero mansion and its secrets. Forget about empty eyes and midnight tears. Go back to the simple life she'd been building, one day at a time. But she had never been good at running from the truth. She opened the door. Sebastian stood in the narrow hallway of the staff quarters, looking wildly out of place in his expensive suit surrounded by modest whitewashed walls. His eyes swept over her face, taking in the tear stains she hadn't bothered to hide, the tangled hair, the wrinkled clothes she had slept in. "You look terrible." "Thank you." Just what every woman wants to hear. Despite everything, a ghost of a smile crossed his face. "My mother always said I had a way with words." "Your mother also said I shouldn't speak to you unless spoken to. And yet here we are." He glanced down the hallway. "Can I come in? This isn't a conversation we should have where anyone might hear." She stepped aside to let him enter. The room was barely large enough for the two of them, just a single bed, a small dresser, and a window overlooking the service courtyard. Sebastian's presence made it feel even smaller, his expensive cologne mixing with the simple soap she used to wash her uniform. "You found something in those documents," he said. "Something personal." "I could see it in your face." "Yes. Are you going to tell me what?" Valentina sat on the edge of her bed, suddenly exhausted. "Your father wasn't just paying off his first wife to stay quiet. He was paying off my mother." The words hung in the air between them. She watched Sebastian's expression shift from confusion to understanding to something she couldn't quite identify. "Your mother was my father's first wife." "No, but she knew her. According to the documents, she was the midwife who helped deliver your father's first son, Luis." Valentina's voice cracked. "My mother told me my older brother died at birth. She lied to me my entire life." Sebastian sank down onto the bed beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. She could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the thin fabric of his suit jacket, could smell the subtle cologne that probably cost more than her monthly salary. The intimacy of the moment felt strange and natural at the same time, two people from opposite ends of the social spectrum sharing the same cramped space. Why would she lie about something like that? "I don't know. The payments went to an account in her name, but I never saw any evidence of extra money growing up. We were always struggling, always barely making ends meet." They sat in silence for a long moment, two people whose lives had been shaped by the same man's secrets without ever knowing it. "I need to find Luis," Valentina finally said. "My brother. I need to understand what really happened. And I need to understand why my father killed himself." Her head snapped toward him. "Killed himself? The report said it was an accident. The report said what my mother wanted them to say." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "My father didn't die in a car accident. He drove his car off that cliff deliberately. I know because he called me 10 minutes before, told me he loved me, and apologized for the man he had been." Oh God, I've spent 6 months trying to figure out what drove him to that. What secrets he was hiding that were so terrible. Death seemed preferable to facing them. He turned to look at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something other than emptiness in his eyes. She saw determination. Now, I'm starting to think those secrets might be connected to the family he abandoned. Valentina felt the pieces clicking into place in her mind, the professional part of her brain that had once made her an excellent psychologist analyzing the patterns. Your father kept meticulous records. He documented everything about his first family, tracked them, made payments for 30 years. That's not the behavior of a man who wanted to forget. That's the behavior of someone who was afraid. Afraid of what? I don't know, but I think we need to find out. Sebastian stood, pacing the small room with restless energy. Do you realize what you're suggesting? You're asking me to dig into my own family's darkest secrets, to potentially destroy everything my mother has spent her life building, to risk the company, the reputation, everything. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm telling you that I need to find my brother and understand why my mother lied to me. What you do with your own family's secrets is your choice. He stopped pacing, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't read. You're different from anyone I've ever met, Valentina Cruz. Most people in your position would be trying to leverage this information. Blackmail, extortion, something. The wealthy learn early that everyone wants something from them, that every kindness comes with hidden strings attached. Most people haven't spent 5 years learning that money and power aren't worth the price they demand. I've seen what happens when people chase wealth at any cost. I've been the victim of that pursuit. I have no interest in becoming the villain of someone else's story. What happened to you 5 years ago? The question cut deep, touching wounds that had never fully healed. She looked away, focusing on the simple white curtain that covered her window. The memories of that time still carried sharp edges, capable of drawing blood even after 5 years of careful healing. I was a psychologist, a good one. I had my own practice, a reputation, patients who trusted me with their deepest secrets and darkest fears. I thought I had built something meaningful, something that would last. And then I got involved with the wrong person. Trusted someone I shouldn't have. He stole everything, my money, my credentials, my identity. By the time the authorities figured out what happened, my reputation was destroyed. No one would hire a psychologist who had been associated with a fraud scandal, even as the victim. That's why you're working as cleaning staff. That's why I'm starting over, from the bottom. She finally met his eyes. So you see, I have nothing to gain from exposing your family's secrets. All I want is the truth about my own. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something she didn't expect. He extended his hand toward her. Partners, then. We investigate together, share whatever we find, and whatever truth we uncover, we face it together. She looked at his hand, perfectly manicured, probably worth more than her entire life savings, just in the watch that glittered on his wrist. Then she looked at his face, at the genuine sincerity she saw there, and made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. She took his hand. Partners. The handshake lingered a moment too long. His skin was warm against hers, his grip firm but gentle. Something shifted in the air between them, some invisible barrier beginning to crumble. The small room suddenly felt charged with electricity, every breath seeming louder than normal, every heartbeat echoing in the silence. He was her employer. She was the cleaning staff. Their worlds could not have been more different, separated by an ocean of money and privilege and social expectation. There were 100 reasons why the awareness crackling between them was a terrible idea. 1,000 reasons to maintain professional distance, to remember her place, to protect her heart from another devastating betrayal. But in that moment, as their eyes held and something unspoken passed between them, Valentina realized that her carefully rebuilt walls were in serious danger. And from the way Sebastian was looking at her, she wasn't the only one who felt it. I should go. he said finally, releasing her hand, "before my mother starts wondering where I am. Your mother seems to wonder about a lot of things. My mother controls a lot of things." His expression darkened. "That's something else we need to investigate. If my father was afraid of something, there's a good chance she knows exactly what it was." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "Valentina, whatever we find, whatever truth we uncover, I need you to know that I meant what I said that first night. You're the first person who's seen me as human in a very long time. Whatever else happens, I'm grateful for that." He left before she could respond, the door clicking softly behind him. Valentina sat alone in her small room, her hand still tingling where he had touched it, her mind racing with everything she had learned and everything that remained unknown. Somewhere out there, she had a brother she had never known. Somewhere in this mansion, there were secrets that had driven a man to suicide. And somewhere in the space between her heart and her head, she was developing feelings for a man who was technically her employer and possibly connected to the darkest chapter of her family's history. Her life had become infinitely more complicated in the span of just 3 short weeks. But for the first time in 5 years, she felt something other than the dull ache of survival. She felt alive, and that terrified her more than any secret ever could. The night deepened around her, the mansion settling into its ancient silence, its walls holding secrets that had waited decades to be discovered. Somewhere above her in his opulent bedroom, Sebastian was probably lying awake as well, his mind churning through the same questions that plagued her own thoughts. They were bound together now. 2 strangers connected by a web of lies and hidden truths that stretched back long before either of them had been born. Tomorrow, their investigation would begin in earnest. Tomorrow, they would start pulling at the threads that held the Montero family's carefully constructed facade together. Tomorrow, the first domino would fall. Tomorrow, everything might change forever. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel the warmth that still lingered where his hand had touched hers, and she wondered what other unexpected and perhaps even wonderful things this strange journey might bring. The investigation consumed them both. For 2 weeks, Valentina and Sebastian worked in secret, meeting in stolen moments between her cleaning shifts and his endless parade of board meetings. They searched through boxes of old documents in the mansion's basement, cross-referenced financial records, and slowly pieced together a picture far more disturbing than either had imagined. The chemistry between them grew with each passing day, an undercurrent of attraction that neither acknowledged aloud, but both felt acutely. Their fingers would brush when passing documents. Their eyes would meet and hold a moment too long. In the darkness of the basement, surrounded by the ghosts of old secrets, something new and fragile was being born between them. But there was no time for romance. Not when every discovery led to darker revelations. Patricio Montero Vega had not simply abandoned his first family, he had systematically erased them from existence. "Look at this," Sebastian said one evening, spreading a series of documents across his desk. Valentina leaned over his shoulder, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough to notice how his expensive cologne had become as familiar to her as the scent of the cleaning products she used every day. "My father didn't just pay off your mother, he paid off an entire network of people, doctors, lawyers, government officials. Everyone who knew about his first marriage received money to keep quiet." Valentina studied the documents, her trained eye catching patterns that others might miss. This goes beyond wanting to hide an inconvenient first family. This level of cover-up suggests he was hiding something specific, something criminal, or protecting someone. Their eyes met, and the same thought passed between them unspoken. Doña Carmen. The investigation had revealed troubling details about Sebastian's mother. Before marrying Patricio, Carmen had been a secretary at his company, beautiful and ambitious, with a reputation for getting exactly what she wanted. The timeline of her relationship with Patricio overlapped disturbingly with his first marriage, suggesting an affair that predated the supposed separation. But more concerning were the financial irregularities they had discovered. Large sums of money moving through shell companies, properties purchased in foreign countries, a pattern of transactions that suggested something far more sinister than simple marital infidelity. "We need to find Luis," Valentina said. "My brother, if anyone knows what really happened 30 years ago, it's him." "I've been trying." Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as frustration. "But every trail goes cold. It's like he vanished into thin air after the payment stopped 5 years ago." "The payment stopped 5 years ago?" Valentina's heart stuttered. "That's exactly when my mother told me she was diagnosed with cancer. That's when I started sending her money to help with treatment." The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Had her mother lied about her illness too? Had the money Valentina struggled to send been replacing payments from Patricio Montero Vega that had suddenly stopped? Before either could process this new revelation, the study door burst open. Doña Carmen stood in the doorway, her elegant features twisted with fury. Behind her stood Rodrigo Mendez, the silver-haired man Valentina had encountered weeks earlier, and 2 security guards whose presence made the threat implicit. "I warned you," Doña Carmen said, her voice cold as Arctic wind. "I warned you both, and yet here you are, digging through matters that don't concern you." Sebastian rose to his feet, positioning himself slightly in front of Valentina in a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by anyone in the room. "Everything about my father concerns me, Mother, including the secrets you've been keeping for 30 years. "Secrets?" Doña Carmen laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You have no idea what I've protected you from, what I've sacrificed to give you this life. Protected me, you've controlled me, manipulated me, made me believe my father loved me when apparently he spent his entire life grieving for another family he was forced to abandon." "Forced?" Something dangerous flickered in Doña Carmen's eyes. "Your father was never forced to do anything. He made his choices, and I made sure those choices benefited us." Valentina stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What did you do, Doña Carmen? What really happened to Patricio's first wife?" The older woman's gaze snapped to her with such intensity that Valentina almost stepped back. "You, the cleaning girl with too many questions. I knew you were trouble the moment you walked through my door. Too educated for your position, too observant, too interested in matters above your station." "She's not just a cleaning girl," Sebastian said. "She's connected to this. Her mother was involved in whatever happened 30 years ago." For a moment, something like fear crossed Doña Carmen's face. Then it hardened into resolve. "Rodrigo, please escort Miss Cruz off the property. She's terminated, effective immediately. And have security ensure she takes nothing that belongs to this household. Mother, you can't do this. I can do whatever I want. This is my house. My company, my family." She turned to face her son fully, and Valentina saw something she hadn't expected in the older woman's eyes. Desperation. "Everything I've done for you, Sebastian, to give you the life you deserve. Don't throw it all away for some woman you've known for a few weeks. This isn't about her. This is about the truth." "The truth?" Doña Carmen's voice rose. "The truth is that your father was weak. He would have destroyed everything for a woman who wasn't worth the ground she walked on. I saved him. I saved this family. I saved you." The guards moved toward Valentina, and she knew she had only seconds. "Sebastian, the documents, the payment records, they're in the basement behind the wine cellar. There's a room your mother doesn't want anyone to find." "Silence her!" Doña Carmen snapped, but Sebastian was already moving, pushing past his mother toward the door. "Don't touch her. Don't you dare touch her." The chaos that followed would replay in Valentina's mind for days afterward. Shouting, struggling, Sebastian's voice rising above the confusion, commanding the security guards to stand down with an authority she had never heard from him before. His transformation in that moment was remarkable. The broken man she had found crying in the hallway, becoming something fierce and protective. Doña Carmen's increasingly desperate attempts to regain control of a situation that was spiraling beyond her grasp grew more frantic by the second. Her carefully maintained facade crumbled piece by piece, revealing something ugly and desperate underneath. The security guards hesitated, caught between their loyalty to the matriarch who signed their paychecks and the obvious authority of the heir who would soon control everything. In the end, it was Rodrigo Mendez who restored order, his cold voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Enough, Carmen, this has gone too far. Your son clearly isn't going to let this go, and frankly, neither will I." He turned to Sebastian with an expression of calculated interest. "Perhaps it's time everyone learned the truth, the full truth, about your father, your mother, and the woman who started it all." "What are you talking about?" Sebastian demanded. Rodrigo smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. "I'm talking about murder, young Montero. Your mother killed your father's first wife, and I have the proof to send her to prison for the rest of her natural life." The words fell like bombs, destroying everything in their blast radius. Valentina watched as Sebastian's face went pale, as Doña Carmen's carefully maintained composure finally shattered, as the foundations of everything she thought she understood crumbled to dust. Murder, not just secrets, not just lies. Murder. And somewhere out there, her brother Luis had witnessed it all. The next 72 hours were the longest of Valentina's life. She'd been escorted off the Montero property by security, her meager belongings hastily stuffed into bags, her heart racing with fear and confusion. The last image she had of Sebastian was burned into her memory, his face contorted with anguish as he fought against the guards holding him back, his voice hoarse from shouting her name. He had tried to stop them, had promised to find her, had looked at her with eyes full of something she was afraid to name. But he hadn't come. 3 days of silence, 3 days of wondering if he had been overwhelmed by his mother's influence once again. 3 days of hoping against hope that the connection they had built hadn't been destroyed by the explosion of family secrets. She had taken refuge in a cheap motel on the outskirts of Mexico City, paying for each night in cash, afraid to use her credit cards in case Doña Carmen had the resources to track her. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and desperation, the kind of place where people went when they had nowhere else to go. In her small room, with its stained carpet and flickering television, she had paced and worried and replayed every moment of that terrible confrontation. Rodrigo Mendez's accusation echoed in her mind. Murder. Doña Carmen had killed Patricio's first wife. And if that was true, then everything Valentina thought she understood about her own family history was built on an even darker foundation than she had imagined. Her mother had known. Esperanza Cruz had accepted money for 30 years to keep silent about a murder. That made her an accessory. That made her complicit in the destruction of a family. On the third day, there was a knock at her door. Valentina's heart stopped. She had told no one where she was staying. Had Doña Carmen found her? Had she sent someone to silence the inconvenient cleaning girl who knew too much? She grabbed the lamp from the bedside table, the only weapon she could find, and approached the door on silent feet. Through the peephole, she saw a face she didn't recognize, a man in his 40s, with dark hair going grey at the temples and eyes that looked hauntingly familiar, eyes that looked exactly like her own. Valentina. The voice through the door was rough, uncertain. "I know you don't know me, but my name is Luis Cruz, and I think we have a lot to talk about." She opened the door with trembling hands. Her brother stood before her, a stranger who shared her blood, looking at her with an expression caught between hope and terror. He was taller than she expected, broader, with the weathered look of someone who had lived a hard life. His clothes were simple but clean, his posture that of a man who had learned to expect nothing good from the world, but hoped for it anyway. But there was no mistaking the resemblance, the same cheekbones that she saw in her own mirror every morning, the same stubborn set of the jaw that her mother had always called her most difficult feature. The same eyes that had stared back at her from photographs her entire life, eyes she had always assumed came from a father she never knew. Those eyes were filled with tears now, tears that matched her own. "How did you find me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sebastián Montero Vega. He hired a private investigator to track me down years ago, apparently. When everything exploded at the mansion, he activated the investigator again and had him locate you too." Luis stepped into the room, looking around at the modest surroundings with an expression that suggested he was familiar with such places. "He's been trying to reach you for 3 days. Your phone is off." Valentina had turned off her phone to avoid being tracked. She hadn't considered that the person trying to reach her might be someone she wanted to hear from. I thought Doña Carmen might have sent someone. "Carmen Montero Vega is currently in police custody." Luis's voice hardened with 30 years of suppressed rage. Rodrigo Mendez made good on his threat. He turned over evidence to the authorities. 30-year-old evidence that proves she poisoned my mother slowly and deliberately over the course of several months and made it look like a natural illness. She watched my mother die, Valentina. She visited her in the hospital, brought her flowers, held her hand, all while knowing she was the one who put her there. The room swayed around Valentina, the ugly walls and stained carpet blurring as her mind struggled to process the horror of what she was hearing. "Your mother, our mother's the first wife." "No." Luis sat down across from her, his expression gentle despite the horror of his words. "My mother was Patricio Montero Vega's first wife, Elena. She died when I was 5 years old. But Esperanza Cruz, your mother, was her sister, my aunt. She raised me after Elena died, until Carmen's money made it impossible for us to stay together." The revelations kept coming, each one more devastating than the last. Valentina listened as her brother unfolded a story that spanned 3 decades, a story of love and betrayal and murder that connected their families in ways she had never imagined. Elena and Esperanza had been sisters, daughters of a poor family in Oaxaca. Elena had married Patricio Montero Vega when he was still a struggling young businessman, before his family's fortune had fully materialized. They had been happy. They had had Luis. They had planned a future together. Then Carmen appeared, beautiful, ambitious Carmen, who saw in Patricio an opportunity for the life she had always wanted. She had seduced him, manipulated him, and when Elena discovered the affair and threatened to expose it, Carmen had taken matters into her own hands. "The doctors called it a sudden illness," Luis said, his voice thick with old grief, but Carmen had been slowly poisoning her for months. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was too late. "And our mother knew?" Esperanza suspected, but she had no proof, and Carmen made it clear that if she talked, Luis would disappear too. So she accepted the money. She raised me until I was 10, and then Carmen decided I was too much of a risk. She had me sent away to a boarding school in another country, and she paid Esperanza to pretend I had never existed. Valentina thought of her mother, of the woman who had raised her with love and warmth while carrying the weight of such terrible secrets. She thought of all the times she had sensed something hidden behind her mother's eyes, all the questions that had been deflected with vague answers and changed subjects. "Why didn't you ever come back? Why didn't you ever try to contact me?" "I did," Luis's voice cracked. "When I turned 18, I tried to find Esperanza. But Carmen's people found me first. They threatened me, paid me off, made it clear that if I ever tried to reconnect with anyone from my old life, there would be consequences." He paused, his eyes filling with tears. "I was a coward, Valentina. I took the money and ran. I built a new life in another country and tried to pretend the first 10 years of my existence hadn't happened. What changed?" "Patricio's suicide." Luis wiped his eyes roughly. "When I heard he had killed himself, I knew it was because Carmen's grip was finally loosening. I knew that if there was ever going to be a chance to expose the truth, it was now. So you came back. I came back, and I found Rodrigo Mendez, who had been collecting evidence against Carmen for years. He had his own reasons for wanting to see her fall, business reasons mostly, but he had proof, real proof, enough to finally bring her to justice. They sat in silence for a long moment, two siblings processing a lifetime of lies and loss. Then Luis reached out and took her hand. "I'm sorry, Valentina. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you grew up without knowing you had a brother. I'm sorry for everything our family has suffered because of Carmen Montero Vega's ambition." Valentina squeezed his hand, feeling the connection of blood and shared history flowing between them. "It's not your fault. None of it was your fault." "There's something else." Luis hesitated. "Sebastián Montero Vega. He's been calling me every few hours, desperate to know if I've found you. That man is in love with you, Valentina. Anyone can see it." Her heart clenched. Sebastian. In all the chaos, all the revelations, she had tried not to think about him, about the way he had looked at her before she was dragged away, about the promises he had made. "His mother killed your mother. Our families are connected by murder. How can there be anything between us after that?" "His mother killed my mother, not him." Luis's voice was firm. "Sebastián Montero Vega has spent his entire life being manipulated by that woman. He's as much a victim as any of us. And from what I understand, he's the one who finally brought her down." Before Valentina could respond, her brother's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and smiled. "Speaking of which, he's downstairs." Apparently he couldn't wait any longer. Valentina found Sebastian standing in the parking lot of the motel, leaning against a car that was far too expensive for its surroundings. He looked terrible, she realized as she approached. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, clothes that looked like he had slept in them for days. He looked like a man who had lost everything. He looked like a man who had found what mattered most. Valentina. Her name on his lips was like a prayer. "I thought I had lost you. I thought after everything, after what my mother did, you would never want to see me again." She stopped a few feet away from him, drinking in the sight of him, this broken heir who had become the most important person in her world. "Your mother's crimes are not your crimes, Sebastian. But her blood runs in my veins. Her lies built my life. Everything I have, everything I am, was purchased with murder and deception. And what are you going to do about it?" The question seemed to startle him. He had expected recrimination, she realized. Expected her to blame him, reject him, add to the weight of guilt already crushing his shoulders. Instead, she was asking him to choose his future. "I've already started." His voice grew stronger as he spoke. "The police have everything. Every document, every record, every piece of evidence we found. My mother will stand trial for murder. Rodrigo Mendez will face charges for his role in the cover-up and his decades of blackmail. The company will be restructured, the board replaced, with people who actually care about ethics and accountability. And what about you? I'm stepping down as CEO." He said it like it was the easiest decision in the world. "I never wanted that life anyway. It was always my mother's dream, not mine. I'm going to use my share of the family fortune to establish a foundation in Elena's name, supporting women and children who have been victims of domestic violence. And then," he hesitated, and then, "I want to build a new life, a real life, with someone who sees me for who I actually am, not for my money or my name or my position." He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Valentina, I know we've only known each other for a few weeks. I know our families are connected in the worst possible way. I know you have every reason to walk away and never look back. But I have never felt more alive than when I'm with you. You saw me at my lowest, and you didn't run. You challenged me, pushed me, made me want to be better than I was. And I know this is crazy. I know it's too fast. But I think," he took a shaky breath, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, fragile and precious as spun glass. Valentina thought about everything she had been through. The betrayal that had destroyed her career, the years of rebuilding herself from nothing, the discovery that her entire family history was built on lies and murder. She had every reason to be cautious, to protect her heart, to walk away from this complicated man with his complicated past. But she also thought about the way he had looked at her that first night, alone and crying in the dark. The way he had trusted her with his secrets when he had no reason to trust anyone. The way he had positioned himself between her and danger, instinctively, protectively, as if her safety mattered more than his own. "I'm not falling," she said quietly. Sebastian's face fell. "I've already fallen." She closed the distance between them, completely, irreversibly, against all logic and reason. For a moment, he simply stared at her, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then his face broke into a smile so radiant it transformed him completely, erasing the shadows that had haunted his eyes since the moment she first saw him. "You're completely crazy," he said. "Probably. But so are you for wanting a former cleaning lady with a complicated family history and zero career prospects. Former cleaning lady with a psychology degree, a brilliant mind, and the most beautiful heart I've ever encountered." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle as butterfly wings. "I don't care about your career prospects. I care about you, only you." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Like finding something she hadn't known she was searching for, like all the broken pieces of her life finally clicking into place. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if he still couldn't quite believe she was real and in his arms. Then it deepened, becoming something more urgent, more certain, a promise of all the kisses that would follow. Around them, the parking lot of the cheap motel seemed to transform. The peeling paint and cracked asphalt faded away, replaced by the golden light of possibility. Two people who had been so thoroughly broken by life had somehow found the courage to be whole together. Behind them, she heard Luis clear his throat. "Not to interrupt this beautiful moment, but some of us have 30 years of family bonding to catch up on. Perhaps you could continue this later." They broke apart, laughing, the joy of the moment washing away the darkness that had brought them together. 6 months later, Valentina stood in a garden overlooking the Pacific Ocean, wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers. The setting was nothing like the opulent Montero mansion where she had first met Sebastian. This was a small property in Puerto Vallarta that they had purchased together, a place without history or ghosts, where they could build something entirely their own. The garden was filled with the people who mattered most, friends she had made during her years of struggle, colleagues from the psychology practice she had recently reopened, funded by Sebastian but built on her own expertise and reputation, people who had believed in her when she had nothing and who celebrated with her now that she had found everything. Luis walked her down the aisle, his eyes bright with tears that he didn't bother to hide. Their bond had grown strong over the past months, the connection of siblings who had found each other against impossible odds. He had moved to Mexico City to be closer to her, had started his own business, had begun the slow process of building a life he had been denied for decades. Their mother, Esperanza, watched from the front row, frail but present, finally freed from the burden of secrets she had carried for so long. She had confessed everything when the police came, had accepted responsibility for her role in the cover-up, and had been granted leniency in exchange for her cooperation in bringing Carmen to justice. Carmen Montero Vega was currently serving a life sentence for murder, her trial having been one of the most sensational in Mexican legal history. The evidence against her had been overwhelming, including testimony from servants who had witnessed her purchasing the poison, financial records showing payments to doctors who had falsified Elena's medical records, and most damning of all, a journal in which she had documented her entire plan with chilling precision. She had shown no remorse at her sentencing, maintaining until the end that everything she had done was justified in the name of love. Rodrigo Mendez had received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy and decades of blackmail. The businessman, who had thought himself above the law, had discovered that justice, though slow, was thorough. His companies had been seized, his assets frozen, his reputation destroyed. The Montero Company had been transformed under new leadership, its practices reformed, its culture changed. Sebastian had handpicked a board of directors committed to ethical business practices, and the foundation he had established in Elena's name was already helping hundreds of families across Mexico. And Sebastian waited at the altar, looking at Valentina like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. "You know," he whispered as she reached him, "most people don't meet their future wife while she's cleaning their house. Most people don't fall in love while investigating their mother for murder. Fair point. We've never done anything the conventional way, have we? And we never will." She took his hands, feeling the rightness of the moment settle into her bones. "But I wouldn't have it any other way." The ceremony was brief and beautiful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of honesty and trust and building a future free from the shadows of the past. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the small crowd erupted in cheers. Later, at the reception, Luis raised a glass. "To my sister, who I lost for 30 years and found again in the most unexpected way. To her husband, who had the courage to face the truth about his own family. And to new beginnings, built on the ashes of old lies." Valentina leaned into Sebastian's embrace, feeling his arms wrap around her with the easy intimacy of someone who planned to spend forever by her side. "What are you thinking?" he murmured against her hair. "I'm thinking about the night I found you crying in that hallway. But how I almost walked away. What stopped you? I don't know. Instinct, fate, the universe finally deciding we both deserved something good." He turned her in his arms, his eyes serious despite the celebration around them. "I will spend every day of my life proving that you made the right choice. Every single day. You already have." She kissed him softly. "Every day since that first night, you've shown me who you really are. Not the heir, not the CEO, just Sebastian, the man I love." They danced under the stars that night. Two people who had found each other in the darkest circumstances and emerged into the light together. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be trials and testimonies, therapy and healing, the slow work of building a life on foundations of truth rather than lies. But they would face it together. The broken heir and the woman who had seen past his facade. The cleaning lady and the man who had recognized her worth. Two souls, connected by tragedy, transformed by love. As the night deepened and the party continued around them, Valentina caught sight of Luis dancing with a woman she didn't recognize, his face lighter than she had ever seen it. He had told her earlier that week that he was thinking of proposing soon, that he had finally found someone who made the past feel like exactly that, the past. Something to be acknowledged but not lived in. Their mother, Esperanza, was laughing at something one of the guests had said, looking younger than she had in years. The weight of her secrets had aged her terribly, but confession and forgiveness had given her back some of the lightness she had lost. She would never fully escape the guilt of what she had been complicit in, but she had been given the chance to be a mother again, to both of her children, and she was determined not to waste it. And Sebastian held Valentina close, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, his love surrounding her like armor against anything the world might throw at them. They had lost so much to Carmen Montero Vega's ambition. They had suffered so much because of one woman's refusal to accept that love couldn't be stolen or manufactured or forced. Families had been torn apart, lives had been destroyed, decades had been lost to fear and silence and carefully maintained lies. But in the end, love had won anyway. Not the twisted, possessive thing that Carmen had mistaken for love, but the real thing. The messy, complicated, beautiful thing that grew between two people who saw each other clearly and chose each other anyway. Real love, true love, the kind that saw past surfaces and positions and bank accounts, the kind that grew in the cracks of broken things and made them beautiful again. The kind that Valentina had stopped believing in, until a crying man in a dark hallway reminded her that miracles could happen to anyone, even to a cleaning lady with a psychology degree and a heart full of hope, standing in a garden by the sea, with the love of her life beside her, especially to her. The end.